Hi, my name is Melissa Smith, and I'm a high school English teacher in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've taught AP Lit for 10 years, and I was an AP reader for the past 3 years, and last year I was on Q2, the prose analysis essay. And I'm going to share some of my insights about that experience being a reader on Q2 last year. So the 2019 Rise of Silas Lapham passage with Irene on the toilet and her sister Penelope. So some of the things I noticed as an AP reader was the highest scoring essays, and I think that's going to be the same on the new rubric, is that they had a controlling idea and insight, an overall meaning, if you will, in their thesis statement, in their introduction. And then in every body paragraph, they would continue to tie back to that and kind of explain how whatever specific thing they were talking about in each body paragraph tied back to that overall meaning and their insight that they had stated in their thesis. So I'll give you a couple examples here too in a second. And then another thing I noticed that the upper scoring essays did successfully is that they talked about the entire passage. So they didn't leave out the beginning, the middle, or the end, because I think for this passage particularly, and really all the passages on all the AP exams previous to this too, every part is important. You know, they started it there for a reason. Like there's something in that first part that they felt was important. And then the same with the end. Like there has to be something in that ending section that they felt was important that they had to include, that they couldn't leave out. So you as a student really need to look at the beginning and the end and think hard about what do I need to see in here? Why are they giving me this? Right? And then, well, the middle too, of course. So in order to get to that insight or that overall meaning that you're going to put in your thesis statement, you're gonna have to really tackle the passage, do some thinking about it, take some notes on the passage, jot some ideas down, and then see how they're all connecting and what meaning can you make from that. So if you took a look at the passage prompt from 2019, it says that you have to analyze how the author portrays the complex experience of the two sisters within their family and society. So you have to make sure that you're tackling all sections of the prompt. You have to talk about the family and society. And some students last year, I noticed in their essays, they only talked about one or the other, which then didn't answer all parts of the prompt, so that probably hurt them a little bit in the long run. And you have to discuss about both of the sisters too. It's telling you Penelope and Irene. So you have to make sure that you do what the prompt is telling you to do. And then of course they give you the list of potential literary techniques that you could discuss. And I would suggest that you can maybe start with one or two of those, but I would suggest adding in one or two of your own that's not on the list. I think that would just be really refreshing as an AP reader because we get really familiar with those techniques in the prompt. We see them over and over and over again. So if you can include a unique one that you feel comfortable with, then I highly suggest you do that too. And when it comes to discussing techniques, don't let them be the focus of each body paragraph. Let them be worked in the meat of the paragraph, really only as a support in you explaining how the author is portraying, whatever in whatever kind of way. So for example, if you're going to talk about Irene, that last section that I think is so important, the end of the passage, that's the last third really of the passage where it talks about Irene and the metaphor of her blooming into a flower as her coming of age moment. And I think that, well, first of all, a lot of students just completely left that part out, and I think that it's an important part of the passage, and so if they did discuss it, that definitely helped their scores out. But really the idea is that Irene is coming of age, right? Irene is having a moment of growing and maturing, and the metaphor is being used in order to help illustrate that, right? So first comes the meaning and the insight, then followed up by textual support and the discussion of the specific literary techniques that are being used. And of course they have to be in there. You have to talk about literary techniques. In order to get 4 in that middle row, you have to talk about multiple actually. So make sure that you have at least 2 worked into your essay and that you're explaining how the literary device is helping to illustrate the insight that you're discussing. So how does this metaphor help to show that Irene is having a maturing moment? How is she growing, right? He also uses the word vegetable earlier, which means like novice or new or green in the world, right? So you can think about this idea of a budding flower, and she's so beautiful. They discuss her beauty in there. Then she meets her boy. And at the end, it says, because they were often mistaken, are the last few words. And I think that one last thing I want to say is tone can be really tricky. And it is one of the selections up in the top in the list of techniques you could talk about. But I would be very careful when you talk about tone, because a lot of the students I noticed last year at the reading, they were misidentifying the tone. They would say the tone is mellow because the girls are kind of, mellow, chilling, taking naps all day. Or they would say the tone is informative. And I would say that those were the two most popular tones, which are both really incorrect. Informative tone is like a how-to manual, right? Like how to put together IKEA furniture. This is an informative tone. I don't think you're going to get any informative tone passages on an AP exam. In this particular passage, really, that last comment there, and then there's the middle section where it's talking about the girls' societal interactions, that they didn't even know any better. They didn't even grasp the idea of European travel. I think the tone in this is actually a little like superior, kind of looking down, condescending, but not in a mean-spirited way, or not in necessarily ridiculing way, but more like a pitiful way. Like, oh, these poor girls, they don't even know any better, bless, right? But yeah, so insight in the beginning, have some kind of controlling overall argument that you can put in your thesis statement, which can be discovered through taking good planning notes beforehand. Make yourself a little like chart or whatever. First, write some notes down for Penelope, and then write some notes down for Irene, and then write some notes down for how they interact with their family, and then for how they interact with society, and then see what you can derive from all that, right? Is it that they are, the author's trying to highlight the contrast of the closeness of their family with then the alienation they face from society? Is he saying that isolation is in fact a negative thing? Could it be damaging, right, to your societal interactions? Or maybe you could just focus on Irene's coming of age, right? Like how she started in the family, and then how she was at first in society, but then by kind of meeting someone outside of her family to help pull her into that, helps her to transform as a character. So there's multiple options, right? Like there's not one not right answer when it comes to an insight or an overall meaning that you can take from the passage. But what we want as AP readers, we want to know what you think, right? What your insights are. That's what we want to read and to see and to reward you too. So this is going to be an adventure this year, guys. It's going to be interesting. We're all going to just try our best and be flexible and continue to prepare and to practice and review. The AP Central tutorial videos are amazing. I think Mr. Escobar and Miss Barber are doing a phenomenal job really tackling all the important parts that we need to know to be successful on this exam. And then your teachers too. They've prepared you up until this point, and go back and think about class and being there with your teacher. Shoot your teacher an email if you have any questions. I'm sure they'd love to hear from you. And ultimately, good luck.